I'm Killen, and this is the first of 3 in my teenage engineering video series. I guess you could say that this is like a celebration for the giving away of this. I'm giving away a Pocket Operator Modular 170, and for those of you who are interested, I'm gonna link a video for that up above and also in the description. The contest ends July 12th, 2020. I've searched a bunch via the interwebs or YouTube and found a bunch of comparisons between the OP1 and the OPZ. They're all super informative, but I'm coming at this from a different angle, and there's still a few things that I'd like to say and compare between these two guys. I actually purchased the OPZ first just because it's a lot more affordable. Loved it right away. And then I bought an OP1 soon after, same thing.
Loved it right away.
I've had each of them for about a year now, and I wouldn't say that one is better than the other. It's kind of like comparing apples and oranges. I mean, if you really think of it, why would teenage engineering make one better than the other? Their goal is to get you to buy both for different reasons, right? Definitely two different beasts, and I think the important question is which one is right for you, and that's what I'm gonna help you find out. First, we'll just sit them next to each other. So obviously OP1 is quite a bit bigger than the OPZ. Different colors. I would say that the OPZ is a lot easier to mistake as a channel changer. OP1 has a screen, OPZ doesn't, although it is possible to hook up your OPZ to an Android or smartphone. Voila, there's your screen. They each have roughly the same amount of buttons and knobs. I actually like the OPZ knobs better just because they're a lot easier to spin. At the same time, the keys on the OP1 feel a lot better. They're easier to play. They're bigger. The first major thing I'll point out is that the OP1 has a much larger selection of synths and drums to choose from. So all of these are different kits. We could go on all day here. You've also got this really cool engine called D-Box. Same thing, there's a bunch of presets. And then if you go into the actual engine, you could create your own drum sounds. This engine is a whole world within itself.
Very cool stuff.
Synth basically functions the same way. You have a bunch of different engines to choose from, and then presets on the right. And then if you want to sculpt your own sounds within each engine, you have the option to do that as well. So let's go to DNA. On top of that, you have even more control with ADSR. And let's not forget the effects. There's some very interesting ones here, like CWO, cow.
No.
So all of that is very easy to access and visually stimulating, very entertaining just to look at the effects, like the cow.
Moo.
That's the reason why there's so many mainstream artists using the OP1. You could literally show up to a session or a jam or whatever, incorporate this into your music and make some magic happen. Like really, it's magical. In the past decade, we've seen this instrument really expand and it's being used in more and more different musical settings. And as amazing as the OPZ is, it just doesn't have that type of diversity. So now talking about composing a full track using the OP1, it's a great tool for that as well. There's one major thing that's hindering about the OP1 though. Once you compose something and then print it onto a track, you're stuck with that. I'll give you a quick example. Here's a riff.
Damn it.
Okay, so let's say I messed up that note. There's no way of going back and correcting it. I have to re-record that whole pattern all over again. You could imagine that this hinders your creative process because let's say you come up with 4 tracks and then all of a sudden one part doesn't really fit and you want to go back and change it. You have to erase the track and then go back to find your sounds and tweak from there. I've done this a million times. It's also very easy to record onto the wrong track. So let's say your drums are on track 2 and you accidentally record bass over track 2. That means you have to redo drums and bass, go back, find all your sounds.
No.
It could be a bit of a headache. And then playing devil's advocate here, on the other hand, this might actually push you to come up with something that you like better, which has also happened to me a million times on the OP1. See what I mean? Informing your decision? Now this is definitely a good time to segue to the OPZ because in this department, it's absolutely killer. Let's say I have this drum pattern and I want to add a bass line to it. This bass line is a little bit out of time, which is no problem. You could quantize it. Obviously, if you want your parts to be a bit looser, you have the option to just keep it unquantized, which is cool. Now let's say I'm not happy with my bass tone. Let's change it. The OPZ is a lot more flexible in this way. It's more like a DAW where you could just add and take out parts like that. Making decisions. Next, let's take a look at sequencing abilities. The OP1 sequencers just feel a lot more straightforward to me, whereas the OPZ is a little bit harder to wrap your head around, but it's infinitely more complex. If you're interested, I have a series of videos called the OP1 Performance Function Series, which goes into each of the sequencers on the OP1. I make a beat with each of them and walk you through how I made that beat. Linked up above and also in the description. On the OP1, you have 7 sequencers to choose from, and each of them has a different workflow. There's a few pattern-based ones that are great for programming permutations, like pattern. There's 2 very unique and notable ones. One of them is called Sketch. As you can see, always these little secrets and little fun, cute, entertaining bits on the OP1. I'm pretty sure you could erase that. You could get very gnarly with this. I don't understand how this one works, and I think that's the point. And then there's Tombola. Now we're going to take a look at the OPZ sequencing capabilities, and this is where the OP1 doesn't compare at all. First, you could sequence a pattern, the same one I was using before. You could copy this pattern over to another and then build on that. These are all different patterns that I already have programmed, so you could sequence those as well. You could also sequence effects and triggers on each of these patterns, which can change from one pattern to the next. I'm going to go to the hi-hat track, and I'm going to add a trigger on every single note. That's a little bit of overkill, so I'm actually going to take all of those back off. And you can do this in real time, by the way. After about a year with the OPZ, I've gathered that its strength is really in its sequencing abilities, which makes it a powerhouse for live performance. You could straight up perform a full live set using just the OPZ, something I'm actually working on. Whereas I think that the OP1 in a live setting is a bit more of like a piece of the puzzle. We're gonna compare one last thing here, and that's sampling. First off, it's really easy to load up and swap out one-shot samples on both the OP1 and the OPZ. That's no problem. They're also both capable of chopping up longer samples as well. It is definitely, without question, way easier to use and chop up samples with the OP1. You could tell that it was built with that sort of workflow in mind. It's just really easy to move things around, chop them up, pitch them up and down on the fly. Let's do this right now. I'm sampling from the headphone jack of my computer directly into the OP1. That 12-second sample is immediately chopped up between all of these keys. You have a nice visual of what you're working with on the screen. You could pitch it very easily. If you press on a given key, you see the visual of each chop. You could change the length of each chop. It's just super easy to work with. This whole process is not as fluid on the OPZ, especially if you're not using a screen. And we can't forget that you're able to sample the radio on the OP1. If your workflow is dominated by using samples, you know what the best choice is for you. I think that's enough for you guys to digest for now. So many people have contacted me saying that they're on the fence about which one to buy, so I figured that this would just be a good video to make. This is the first of 3 videos in my Teenage Engineering Modular 170 giveaway. For details on how to enter that, it's super simple. Description. I've left a link to some of my Teenage Engineering oriented playlists also in the description. As always, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next video next week.